I'm Jonah, 36 male. I live in a small studio apartment in Denver where the floorboards creak and the windows rattle when the wind blows, but it's mine. I work as a counselor at a halfway house, helping people piece their lives back together because for 2 decades my own life was shattered into a million pieces. For 20 years I carried the crushing weight of a lie that my very existence had bankrupted my family and cost them everything. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The ghost of who I used to be, or rather, who I was told I was, lives in the quiet moments. It's there when I hesitate before buying a new pair of shoes, even though I can afford them. It's in the way I eat my food quickly as if afraid someone will take it away. For 20 years, from age 16 to 36, I was a man haunted by a debt I could never repay, a debt I was told I'd incurred simply by being born. My stepmother Vera was the architect of this lie. She came into my life when I was 18 months old, a year after my mother died during childbirth. My father, William, was a good man but grieving and overwhelmed. Vera, with her 2 children, Damon and Bridget, must have seemed like a lifeline. To me, she became an anchor, dragging me down into a sea of guilt. The story she told was simple, brutal, and repeated so often it became the gospel of our household. "Your birth was a disaster," she'd say, her voice laced with a familiar, weary resentment. "Complications, surgeries, months in the neonatal ICU, it cost a fortune. $500,000, Jonah, that's the price of your life." This wasn't just a story told once in a while, it was the soundtrack to my childhood. It was whispered over dinners where my portion was always the smallest. It was shouted during arguments about bills. It was etched into the very fabric of our home in Clearwater, Kansas. Our house was a museum of lack. The roof leaked, staining the ceiling with brown, map-like patterns. The furnace clanked and wheezed its way through every winter, often giving up completely, forcing us to huddle around cheap space heaters. Everything was broken, worn out, or second-hand, and every single flaw was a testament to my expensive entry into the world. My step-siblings played their parts perfectly. Damon, 5 years my senior, was Vera's enforcer. He was bigger, stronger, and wielded my supposed debt like a weapon. At school, he'd slam me against lockers, his voice a low growl. "We could have had nice things," he'd hiss. "Vacations, a new car, a pool, but then Dad had to spend it all keeping you from dying." He made sure I understood that my life had been purchased at the cost of his happiness. Bridget, 3 years older, was quieter, which somehow made her resentment cut deeper. She had our father's kind eyes, but they always looked at me with a cool, detached disappointment. Once when I was 12, she found me crying after another of Vera's tirades. "I know it's not really your fault," she'd said, her voice lacking any real sympathy. "But every time Mom talks about money, every time I have to wear clothes from the thrift store, I can't help but think of that $500,000. I think about the life we were supposed to have." My father was a ghost in this narrative. He died in a car crash when I was 3, leaving me with only a single framed photograph as proof of his existence. In the picture, he's holding me as a newborn in a hospital room surrounded by tubes and machines. He looks utterly exhausted, but he's smiling down at me with a look of pure, unconditional love. Vera used that photo as her cruelest prop. "Look at him," she'd say, pointing a long, nicotine-stained finger. "He worked himself into an early grave trying to pay for you. You exhausted him and then you lost him." So I learned to be invisible. I made myself as small and quiet as possible. I never asked for anything, not new clothes, not school supplies, not even a birthday cake. At 14, I got a job as a dishwasher at a local diner, working grueling hours after school and on weekends. Every Friday, I'd come home, my clothes smelling of grease and bleach, and hand my entire paycheck over to Vera. She'd snatch it from my hand, never a word of thanks. "It's a start," she'd sniff, "but it's a drop in the ocean." Growing up believing you are a liability shapes you in profound ways. You walk through the world with an apology on your lips. You flinch when people are kind, certain there's a catch. When a teacher praised an essay I wrote, I was convinced she was just trying to be encouraging. When a girl invited me to a school dance, I turned her down, paralyzed by the thought of asking Vera for money for a ticket or a rented suit. I felt I didn't have the right to experience the normal joys of being a teenager. I was a debt walking around in human form, and my only purpose was to try fruitlessly to pay it back. The weight of it settled deep in my bones, making me feel perpetually old, tired, and undeserving. Little did I know, the lie was the only thing that was cheap. The truth, however, would turn out to be more expensive and liberating than I could ever imagine. The morning of my 16th birthday began like any other day, in the cold, pre-dawn darkness of our perpetually failing house. Vera's fist pounded on my door at 5:30 a.m. sharp. "Get up. Do you think a birthday means you get to be lazy? The world doesn't stop just because you were born." I remember the air being so cold I could see my breath as I pulled on the greasy dishwashing uniform I'd fallen asleep in the night before. I was too tired to change after my shift had ended at midnight. Downstairs, I went through the motions of my morning ritual. I made scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee for Vera, Damon, and Bridget. I served them while they sat at the wobbly kitchen table, propped up on one side by an old phone book. Damon, radiating the casual cruelty of a high school sports star, ate without a single word of acknowledgement. Bridget picked at her food, complaining that she had nothing new to wear to school. Vera sat at the head of the table, a menthol cigarette dangling from her lips, as she sorted through a pile of what looked like bills, sighing dramatically with each envelope she opened. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered to myself as I stood at the sink, washing their dishes in lukewarm water. "What was that?" Vera's voice cut through the air like a shard of glass. "Nothing," I said quickly, just thinking out loud. "Well, think faster, you're going to miss the bus." I grabbed my tattered backpack, the one with the broken zipper held together by a combination of duct tape and safety pins, and headed for the front door. Just as my hand touched the knob, Vera's voice stopped me. "Actually, Jonah, hold on a second." For a single stupid, hopeful moment, my heart leaped. Maybe she'd remembered. Maybe there was a card, a small gift, even just a simple happy birthday. It was a foolish thought born from a desperate, childish part of me that refused to die. She stood up from the table and walked toward me, holding something behind her back. It wasn't a gift. It was a black plastic garbage bag, the thick kind used for yard waste, and it was bulging with my clothes. "What's that?" I asked, though a cold dread was already spreading through my chest. "Your things," she said, her voice flat and businesslike. "You're 16 now. In Kansas, that means you're old enough to work full-time. It's time for you to leave." The words seemed to hang in the air, nonsensical and foreign. "Leave, go where?" "I don't care where," she said, her expression unreadable. "Anywhere but here. You've been a weight on this family for 16 years. It's time we cut you loose." Panic began to claw its way up my throat. "But this is my home, you're my family." A harsh, bitter laugh escaped her lips. "I am not your mother. Your mother is the one who started this whole mess. I was just the fool who married your father and inherited his $500,000 problem. You." "I'll work more," I pleaded, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "I'll quit school. I'll give you every cent I make, please." "You already do," she countered, unmoved. "And it's never enough. It will never be enough. You owe us a debt you can't possibly repay. You are a financial black hole, Jonah, don't you get it?" Damon appeared in the doorway then, a smirk playing on his lips. "Mom's been planning this for weeks," he said, enjoying my shock. "We're moving to California. Aunt Patricia got Mom a job. We're getting a fresh start without any baggage." "I'm not baggage," I choked out. "I'm your brother's." "Stepbrother," he corrected me coldly, "and that's over now, too." Bridget came down the stairs, her eyes fixed on the floor. She wouldn't look at me. "Mom, maybe we should just wait," she said weakly. "Let him at least finish the school year." "We've waited 16 years, Vera snapped, her voice rising. 16 years of dodging collectors, of having our credit cards declined, of watching our friends go on vacation while we patch holes in the roof. I am done waiting." She shoved the garbage bag into my chest, the force of it making me stumble back. "Your father chose you over us. He looked at the mountain of bills and decided our future was less important than yours. Well, he's gone and now I'm choosing us." My voice was barely a whisper. "Please, it's January, it's freezing outside. You should have thought of that before you decided to be so expensive to keep alive." She moved to shut the door and I put a hand on it to stop her. "This is illegal. You can't just throw a kid out." Vera leaned in close, her breath a toxic mix of coffee and menthol. "Go ahead, call the police. Tell them how we fed and clothed you for 13 years while you bled us dry. I have the bills, the collection notices, the bankruptcy filings. What do you have?" "Nothing." She was right, I had nothing. Her word backed by a folder of fabricated documents against mine. "Now get off my porch," she snarled, her face a mask of disgust. The door slammed shut. I heard the click of the deadbolt, followed by the metallic slide of the chain lock. Through the little window in the door, I saw Damon give Vera a high five. Bridget had vanished. I stood there on that freezing porch, clutching a garbage bag full of my life, utterly alone. I waited for 3 hours, shivering, convinced it was some horrible, elaborate lesson. But then a locksmith's van pulled into the driveway and I knew it was real. This was the end. I picked up my garbage bag and walked away, my identity reduced to a piece of trash being taken to the curb. The 20 years that followed my 16th birthday were a blur of survival. I learned the brutal geography of homelessness, mapping out the hidden corners of cities where a person could disappear. I slept under bridges in abandoned buildings and in the doorways of churches. I learned to distinguish between the hunger that gnaws at your stomach and the deeper hunger for dignity. The cold was a constant enemy, but the worst part was the invisibility. People don't see you when you're on the streets, they look through you as if you're a ghost. After a while, you start to believe it yourself. You start to believe you are what Vera said you were, worthless, a burden garbage. But I clawed my way back. Slowly, painstakingly, I pieced together a life. A priest at a mission in Denver saw something in me and helped me get my GED. I worked warehouse jobs, saving every dollar with a fierce, desperate obsession. Eventually, I got my counseling certification and started working at Second Chance's halfway house, the very place that had once offered me a bed. I found a purpose in helping others navigate the same darkness I had known. My life was small, quiet, and built on the fragile foundation of self-reliance. I had my own apartment, a steady job, and a routine. It wasn't happiness exactly, but it was stable. And for someone who had lived in chaos, stability felt like a kingdom. Then came the phone call that set my carefully constructed world on fire. I was mopping the supply closet, a task I still did from time to time because it grounded me, when my supervisor, Ruth, knocked on the door. Ruth was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who had the uncanny ability to see straight through people's defenses. "Jonah," she said, poking her head in, "there's a lawyer on the line for you. Says his name is Harrison Caldwell, calling from New York. Sounds important. He says he's been trying to track you down for 3 years." I almost laughed. A lawyer for me. It's probably a scam, Ruth. Tell him I'm not interested in any Nigerian princes. He was very specific, she insisted, handing me the cordless phone. He asked for Jonah Reeves, son of William Adakis Reeves. My hand froze. Adakis. It was my father's middle name, a strange and distinctive name I hadn't heard or seen in over 30 years. It wasn't on his tombstone or in his obituary. The only place I'd ever seen it was on my original birth certificate, a document I'd only glanced at once when I was 25 and trying to get a state ID. No one knew that name. Vera had never used it. It was a secret key to a past I didn't know I had. I took the phone, my heart starting to pound a nervous rhythm against my ribs. "This is Jonah Reeves," I said, my voice hoarse. "Mr. Reeves," a calm, professional voice replied, imbued with the kind of confidence that comes from expensive suits and corner offices. "My name is Harrison Caldwell of Caldwell and Associates. I am the executor of the estate of Constance Adakis Reeves." The name meant nothing to me. "I think you have the wrong person. I don't know anyone by that name." "Please do not hang up," the voice urged gently. "Constance Adakis Reeves was your paternal grandmother, your father's mother." The mop handle slipped from my grasp and clattered loudly on the tiled floor. "That's impossible. My father was an orphan. He didn't have any family." That was another part of Vera's story, that my father had been utterly alone in the world, which was why she had been so burdened by his debts. "That is not accurate, Mr. Reeves," Caldwell said patiently. "Your father estranged himself from his family when he was a young man, but his mother, Constance, never stopped looking for him. After his passing, she spent years trying to find you. When she learned what your stepmother had done, she made significant changes to her will." I leaned against the wall, the smell of pine-scented cleaner filling my lungs but doing nothing to clear the fog in my head. "What are you talking about? What did my stepmother do?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, as if the lawyer was choosing his next words with surgical precision. "Mr. Reeves, this is difficult to discuss over the phone, but you need to know. Your grandmother passed away 18 months ago. She has left you her entire estate." He paused again. "The total value of your inheritance is approximately $89 million. $89 million. The number was so absurd, so astronomical that it didn't register as real. It sounded like a line from a movie. My entire life had been defined by a supposed debt of $500,000, a sum that had seemed impossibly large. 89 million was a different galaxy of existence. "But there's more," Caldwell continued, his voice dropping slightly. "And this is the most important part. Your stepmother's story about your father's finances, it was a complete fabrication. Your father was not in debt when he died. In fact, he was a wealthy man. The medical expenses from your birth were almost entirely covered by a trust fund and insurance. Mr. Reeves, you were never a burden to your family. You were the victim of a very calculated and cruel fraud." The supply closet suddenly felt like it was shrinking, the walls closing in on me. I couldn't breathe. Every belief I had held about myself, every ounce of guilt I had carried for 20 years was being systematically dismantled by a stranger's voice on the phone. It was all a lie. The poverty, the debt, the reason I was thrown away, none of it was real. I wasn't a burden, I was an heir. And I had been robbed of everything, not just money, but the truth itself. 3 days later, I was sitting in an office that felt like it belonged in another universe. Harrison Caldwell's firm occupied the 40th floor of a glass tower overlooking Park Avenue. The journey there had been surreal. The first-class plane ticket Caldwell had sent, the black car that met me at the airport, the hushed elegance of the marble lobby, it all felt like a dream I was about to wake up from. My worn jeans and 10-year-old jacket felt glaringly out of place amidst the polished mahogany and expensive art. Caldwell in person was a man in his 70s with a full head of silver hair and eyes that were both sharp and kind. He greeted me not with pity, but with a quiet respect that I found disarming. He led me to his office, a cavernous room lined with leather-bound books and featuring a floor-to-ceiling window with a staggering view of the city. He placed a thick, leather-bound folder on the massive desk between us. "Before we go through the official documents, Jonah," he began, his voice gentle, "I believe you deserve to know the full story. It's important you understand the truth of your father's life and your grandmother's." I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He opened the folder and slid a black and white photograph across the desk. It showed a handsome young man, unmistakably my father, standing beside a stern, elegant woman adorned with pearls. They were posed in front of a sprawling stone mansion that looked like something out of an old movie. "This is your father, William, at age 19, with your grandmother, Constance Adakis Reeves," Caldwell explained. The Adakis family amassed a significant fortune in the late 19th century through mining and manufacturing. Your father was raised in a world of immense privilege. I stared at the image, trying to reconcile the smiling young man in the photo with the tragic, debt-ridden figure from Vera's stories. Vera said he was poor, that he had nothing. "Had everything," Caldwell corrected softly. "But he was controlled by a mother who had his entire life mapped out for him, including an arranged marriage to a woman from another wealthy family. Then when he was 18, he met your mother, Emma." He produced another photo, this one of a young woman with a warm, radiant smile wearing a simple server's uniform. She was working at a charity gala. Your father fell in love instantly. Constance, however, was furious. She forbade the relationship. My father, it turned out, was a romantic and a rebel. He made a choice. He walked away from the hundreds of millions of dollars, from the family name, from the entire life that had been prepared for him. He took only the money in his personal bank account, changed his name from William Adakis Reeves to just William Reeves, and moved to Kansas with my mother to start a new life. He gave it all up for her, I whispered, a wave of emotion washing over me. He gave it up for love, Caldwell confirmed. And by all accounts, he never regretted it. He was successful on his own terms. He opened a small hardware store, which eventually grew into a chain of 3 highly profitable businesses. Caldwell then began to lay out the evidence piece by damning piece. He showed me bank statements, insurance documents, and hospital records he had spent years acquiring. The story of medical bills was the cornerstone of Vera's deception, he said, pointing to a document from the hospital. "Yes, your birth had complications and your care was expensive, but your maternal grandparents, who were moderately well off, had established a trust fund for you. That, combined with your father's excellent health insurance, covered nearly everything. The total out-of-pocket cost for your father was just over $30,000, which he paid in full within 2 years." "30,000, I said, the number sounding absurdly small compared to the phantom $500,000 that had defined my life. She showed me bills, collection notices. "Forgeries," Caldwell stated flatly. "After your father's death, Vera gained control of all his financial records. We believe she destroyed the real documents and created a fictional paper trail of debt to support her story." He slid another folder toward me. "This is the probate court filing from after your father passed. He died without a will. He was young and thought he had more time. Under Kansas law at the time, as the surviving spouse, Vera inherited everything. She liquidated all of your father's assets within 6 months. The 3 hardware stores, his investment portfolio, and 2 life insurance policies that named you and her as beneficiaries. The total value, after all was said and done, was just over $2 million. The room started to feel unsteady. $2 million. Money that should have been my security, my future, my college education. What did she do with it? Caldwell's expression hardened. "This is the cruelest part. We tracked the transactions. Within a week of cashing out the final assets, she made a down payment on a house in California. She set up college funds for Damon and Bridget. She invested the remainder very wisely. By the time she threw you out on your 16th birthday, claiming the family was broke because of you, her net worth was approaching $3 million. I couldn't process it. She had millions. She had millions, and she threw me out in the dead of winter with nothing but a garbage bag and a lecture about my worthlessness. It wasn't about the money. She already had the money. It was about cruelty. It was about erasing me." But your grandmother was watching, Caldwell said, his voice pulling me back from the brink. Constance had hired private investigators to keep track of you after your father's death, hoping she could one day repair the relationship. They documented everything, Vera's lies, the emotional abuse, and the events of your 16th birthday. He read from a typed report, his voice devoid of emotion. Subject expelled from family residence, provided with belongings in a plastic trash bag. Subject remained on porch in freezing temperatures for approximately 3 hours before family hired a locksmith to change the locks. He explained that Constance had spent years frantically trying to find me, but I had vanished into the cracks of society. Believing I was either dead or lost forever, she rewrote her will, leaving the entirety of the Adakis fortune to the grandson she had never met but felt she had failed. It was her final act of redemption, an attempt to right a terrible wrong. I wasn't a burden. I was the heir to a fortune, and the only thing I had ever truly cost anyone was a lie. Sitting in that opulent office, with the truth laid bare in a series of sterile documents and reports, I felt a strange and hollow emptiness. For 20 years, my identity had been built around a singular, crushing idea. I was a debt. I was the reason for my family's hardship. Now that foundation was gone, ripped out from under me, and I was free falling. The $89 million was an abstract concept, a number too large to comprehend. The $2 million Vera had stolen, however, felt painfully real. That was the price of a life, a home, an education, a childhood free from the gnawing guilt that had consumed me. Harrison Caldwell seemed to sense my turmoil. He slid one final item across the desk, a thick cream-colored envelope sealed with dark blue wax. "Your grandmother left this for you," he said softly. "She wanted you to have it once you understood the full truth." My hands trembled as I broke the seal. The handwriting inside was elegant but shaky, the script of someone racing against time. "My dearest Jonah," the letter began. "If you are reading this, it means Harrison has found you, and for that I am eternally grateful. It also means you now know the truth of the lies that have shaped your life. There are no words to express my regret. I failed your father. My pride and my obsession with control drove away my only son, and in doing so I failed you as well. Your father called me once, not long after you were born. He was so full of joy. He told me that holding you in his arms made him realize how foolish our arguments had been. He said you were perfect, and he wanted to bring you to meet me to finally heal the rift between us. I was stubborn, I was proud, I refused. A week later, he was gone, and I have lived with the ghost of that final conversation every day since. When my investigators told me what that woman Vera had done, how she had stolen your inheritance and then cast you out with a story of debt, I felt a pain that eclipsed even the loss of my son. The very wealth I had used to try and control him had become a weapon used to destroy his legacy and harm his child. I cannot undo the damage of my past, but I can give you the future you were denied. This fortune is not a gift, it is a restoration. It is the life your father wanted for you. Use it to heal, use it to build something beautiful. And if you can, find it in your heart to forgive an old woman who learned far too late that the only thing of value we have in this world is family. With deepest love and regret, your grandmother, Constance." Tears I didn't know I still had streamed down my face. I cried for the father I never knew, a man who had chosen love over fortune. I cried for the grandmother I'd never met, a woman who had spent her final years consumed by a desperate need for redemption. And I cried for the 16-year-old boy on the porch who had believed he was unlovable when, in fact, he had been loved fiercely all along. The money, the $89 million, suddenly crystallized into a single, clear purpose. My first instinct, a dark and vengeful one, was to use it to destroy Vera, Damon, and Bridget. My lawyers assured me it would be easy. We had a mountain of evidence for fraud, theft, child abandonment, and emotional distress. I could ruin them, strip them of their comfortable California lives built on a foundation of deceit. I imagined their faces as they were served with lawsuits, their carefully constructed worlds crumbling around them. But as I sat there, Constance's letter in my hand, another thought began to take shape. Revenge felt small. It would be a momentary satisfaction, but it wouldn't heal the wounds of the past 20 years. It wouldn't give me back my childhood. What would real justice look like? I thought of Ruth, my supervisor at the halfway house. I remembered something she once told a resident who was consumed with anger at his family. "Living well isn't the best revenge," she'd said. "Living a life of purpose is." Vera had used money as a weapon to cast me out. I would use it as a tool to bring others in. She had created a fiction of lack to justify her cruelty. I would create a reality of abundance to foster healing. That was the real way to honor my father and my grandmother. I turned to Caldwell, my mind clear for the first time in days. "I don't want to sue them," I said, my voice steady. I have another plan. I told him my idea to create a foundation. A foundation dedicated to helping homeless and at-risk youth, specifically those who had been thrown out by their families. We would provide not just shelter and food, but education, therapy, and job training. We would give them the support and resources they needed to build the futures that had been stolen from them. And I knew exactly what I would call it. The Atekas House, I said, after my father's name, the name that unlocked the truth. Caldwell smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. I think, he said, looking at the letter in my hand, your grandmother would have liked that very much. In that moment, I realized the inheritance wasn't just the money, it was the opportunity to turn 2 decades of pain into a lifetime of purpose. It was a chance to ensure that no other kid holding a garbage bag would ever have to feel as worthless as I once did. Instead of legal papers, I hired a private investigator. I didn't need to find my former family. Harrison Caldwell's files contained their addresses. I just wanted to understand the lives they had built on my stolen inheritance. The report was a portrait of opulent success. Vera was a respected real estate agent in Malibu, living in a beachfront property worth millions. Damon was a sought-after plastic surgeon in Beverly Hills, his life a carousel of luxury cars and exclusive parties. Bridget owned a chic, successful boutique on a trendy street in Santa Monica. They were the picture of the American dream, a dream funded by fraud. For a week I wrestled with what to do. The desire for them to face public humiliation was strong. I imagined a newspaper headline, Malibu socialite built life on stolen money and abandoned stepson. But every time I pictured it, Ruth's words echoed in my mind. What would it achieve? It wouldn't erase the nights I spent freezing behind a dumpster or the years I spent believing I was human garbage. Justice, I decided, wasn't about tearing them down. It was about showing them what I had built up. The grand opening of the first Atekas house in Denver was a small, quiet affair. We had taken over an old, renovated hotel, transforming it into a safe, beautiful space for 40 young people. There were reporters from local news stations, city council members, and the staff and residents of Second Chances who had become my real family. I gave a short speech, not about my past, but about the future we hoped to build for the kids who would call this place home. A photographer captured a moment when I was standing in the lobby, surrounded by some of the first residents, teenagers with wary eyes but a flicker of hope. In the photo, I am smiling, a genuine smile of peace and purpose. I had 3 copies of that photograph printed on high-quality paper. In a simple, elegant card, I wrote a single sentence, the same for each of them. I know the truth and I forgive you. I mailed one to Vera's mansion in Malibu, one to Damon's clinic in Beverly Hills, and one to Bridget's boutique in Santa Monica. Then I waited. Bridget called less than an hour after the courier delivered the package. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. Jonah, oh my God, Jonah, I'm so sorry, she cried, her voice choked with guilt. I swear I didn't know the extent of it. Mom showed us bills, she cried about money all the time, I believed her. I thought we were poor because of you. I never understood how we could suddenly afford to move to California, how she could pay for my college. She told me she had a secret savings account. I was so ashamed of how I treated you, but I never knew she stole from you. I am so sorry. I listened, and for the first time, I didn't hear the resentful girl from my childhood. I heard a woman grappling with a terrible truth. I believed her. Our conversation was halting and painful, but it was the beginning of rebuilding something that had been broken for 2 decades. Damon never called, but about a month later, Bridget told me he had checked himself into a high-end therapy retreat. He's not handling it well, she explained, her voice low. The photo and your note, it broke him. He told me he remembers every single cruel thing he ever said to you every time he pushed you. He said he became a plastic surgeon to fix people's appearances because he feels like his own soul is ugly and twisted beyond repair. His silence was, in its own way, a louder confession than Bridget's tears. He couldn't face me because he couldn't face himself. Vera's response was the most telling of all, complete and total silence. She never reached out. But through Bridget, who still maintained a strained relationship with her, I heard that she had been consumed by paranoia. She had sold her beachfront house at a loss and moved to a gated community, convinced I was going to expose her and destroy the reputation she had so carefully crafted among her wealthy friends. She had developed anxiety, suffering from panic attacks and refusing to answer her phone if she didn't recognize the number. She was living in a prison of her own making. Every luxury she enjoyed, every dollar she spent was now tainted by the truth. The ghost of the 16-year-old boy she had thrown out into the cold was now a permanent resident in her gilded cage. She had spent decades hiding from a fabricated debt, and now she would spend the rest of her life haunted by a real one. My quiet act of forgiveness had become their judgment. I hadn't needed lawyers or courtrooms. The truth, delivered in a single photograph, had been the most powerful and effective confrontation of all. It didn't give them prison sentences, but it gave them something far more permanent, the inescapable burden of their own conscience. It has been 2 years since I received that life-altering phone call. My world today is unrecognizable from the small, cautious life I had built. The Attekis House Foundation is now a national organization, with 5 houses operating in cities across the country and 3 more under construction. We have helped hundreds of young people find their footing, providing them with the safety, support, and love they were denied. I spend my days traveling between the houses, meeting with staff, and most importantly, sitting with the kids. They are my purpose. Their resilience, their hope, their determination to build a future from the wreckage of their pasts, that is the fuel that keeps me going. The $89 million is a tool, a powerful one, but I've learned it's not the real inheritance. The true inheritance was the truth. It was learning that my father hadn't abandoned me to a mountain of debt, but had loved me so fiercely he gave up his own fortune for a life with me. It was discovering that a grandmother I never knew saw my value and spent her final years trying to restore what had been stolen. The money gives people shelter, but the truth gives them worth. And for 20 years, I had neither. My relationship with Bridget is a quiet, tentative thing, slowly being rebuilt over weekly phone calls. She is wrestling with her own guilt, but she's also trying to make amends. Last Christmas, she flew to Denver and spent a week volunteering at the Attekis House, listening to the residents' stories with a compassion that was heartbreakingly genuine. She sold her boutique and now works for a nonprofit that advocates for at-risk youth. She is, in her own way, paying back a debt that was never mine to begin with. I never heard from Damon or Vera again. I don't need to. Their punishment is living inside the walls of the lie they created, while I get to live outside in the freedom of the truth. Last week, a new resident arrived at the Denver house. She was 16, the same age I was when my life was torn apart. She stood in the entryway, clutching a black plastic garbage bag to her chest as if it were a lifeline. Her parents had kicked her out because she told them she was gay. She was terrified, her eyes darting around the warm, inviting lobby as if expecting a trap. I walked over and knelt so I was at her eye level. "Welcome to Attekis House," I said gently. "You're safe here." She looked at me, her gaze filled with a mixture of suspicion and despair. "Why?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Why are you being nice to me? You don't even know me." I looked at the garbage bag in her hands, a symbol that no longer held any power over me. I thought of my father's sacrifice, my grandmother's redemption, and the 2 decades I spent lost in the wilderness of a lie. "Because someone once made me believe that I was too expensive to keep," I told her, my voice clear and steady. "It took me 20 years to find out they were wrong. You are not a burden. You are not a problem. You are not too much of anything. You are exactly who you are meant to be, and you deserve to be loved for it. This place," I said, gesturing to the warm, light-filled building around us, "is not charity, it's justice. It's what every kid deserves." Her tough facade crumbled and she began to cry, the silent, shoulder-shaking sobs of someone who has been holding it all in for far too long. I stood up and put a hand on her shoulder. I remembered what it felt like to be 16 and thrown away. But more powerfully, I remembered what it felt like to finally learn the truth, that love doesn't come with a price tag and worth isn't measured in dollars. "My name is Jonah Reeves. Vera stole $2 million from me, but she could not steal what truly mattered. My father's love, my grandmother's legacy, and my capacity to turn pain into power. The real inheritance wasn't the money, it was the story. And now, I spend every day using that story to help other kids write a different ending for their own."